Hello again. This is, I believe, part 3 of thoughts about this book, Talking to Terrorists. I'm going to begin going through this a little faster than I have before. The book is 700 pages, and a lot of it is really stories like this. Right. When I ask him about himself, he tells me that he's from Beit Forik, the village near Nablus. We were 31 male students in my high school class, he says, rubbing his forehead. 27 of them exploded themselves. Right? Stunned, I try to imagine being college age and having only 4 classmates left out of my high school class, the rest having died as suicide bombers. Right? So, I, and the vast majority of people on the planet, don't deal with instances like that, don't have to face such a mass casualty level or such daily disruptions at the age of this kid's in college that she's interviewing of 20 and so on. We might have somebody in middle school who died that we know of, right? I've lost a friend or a parent or a cat or a dog by the time we're in college. As we grow older, we lose more and more people, but most of them are older. Most of them are in ill health. Sometimes it's a surprise when a friend passes away. You don't even know or understand really what's happened. And then another one, and another one, another one, right? It weighs upon you. But we have time to sort of come to grips with it. And when we're older, more and more people we know of our own age have passed away. You go to a high school reunion and there's only you and 4 other people left, that sort of thing. This happens over time, slowly. It doesn't happen all at once. And this book is 750 pages about. It took me probably a week and a half to get through. Not because of the length or the technical language, but instead because of the emotional trauma that is dripping through almost every page. Right? She's talking to terrorists here is the name of the book. And she's only begun to talk to actual terrorists. She's mostly right now talking with college kids who are thinking about it, talking with the kind of folk who know their friends have done this. She's going to be talking with parents who have lost children, with siblings who have lost cousins, and bits like that. And she interviews probably 100 people just in Palestine. I have the comparative privilege of being able to shut the book and walk away. I had the time to read 100 pages a day and then set it down and say, okay, I don't feel good reading this. Right? I can barely deal with my own traumas, let alone someone else's. So I'm going to put it down. I'm going to go and I'm going to play Final Fantasy XII for a bit. I'm going to go run through another Pokemon Red modifier. I'm going to go read a comic book. I'm going to watch an anime again. I'm going to look at an episode of Heracles, The Legendary Journeys. I'm going to play with the cat. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to draw or paint. I'm going to put on headphones and listen to music. I'm going to zone out for 45 minutes. I'll go walk around, look at the sunset, that sort of thing. And you calm down, you come back. The next day, you read the book, and you put yourselves into people's lives. You empathize with them. And at the same time, you understand that these are both the killers and the killed. That's the conundrum of a suicide bombing, right? That's the conundrum of going out in a blaze, that you consume yourself in the action and you aren't around to see it. You aren't around to know how your family feels. You aren't around to recognize the people that you've hurt and destroyed. You aren't around to experience a catharsis and make your life better, right? You're gone. So what she's going to emphasize is that this is not normal. People don't like this. That kids, growing up and experiencing trauma, people who are assaulted or under attack, or who feel that they've been attacked. This happens to everybody in a way. And then we repair ourselves, we review, right? We might end up hitting a bully, we might end up getting into a few fights, but the vast majority of us think we want to live, we want to do something, we want to create, we want to have meaning to our lives, we want to learn and feel and love and dance and sing and watch films and play video games and travel and see the world and help our families. But, like if you're a suicide bomber, you're not doing any of those things. You're saying, I'm out, I'm done. And I think I understand suicide flat a little more clearly, right? The idea that life is too hard, I'm out of here. It's the suicide bombing which is extremely disruptive, like the decision to go out taking someone down with you. It's not just about life sucks, it's about life sucks and I need to do something about it that affects other people. So the feeling is that life sucks not because of who I am or what I am, it's that life sucks because of what someone has done to me, right? Life is bad because of what is inflicted upon me. Later in the book, she tries to run a de-radicalization program with the American military, and it doesn't work very well. She seems to blame the American military and their reaction, their methods for this, because it's hard to do, right? The story she's going to push, I think, the story she finds, is that radicalization and suicide bombing and all these happen because of societal issues. There are personal stories that go on, but for the main part, it seems that there are these horrible people have been horrified themselves and attacked and beaten, so on, or they know people who this has happened to, or they've been arrested, and you hear stories over and over again, and then it's like, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? There's no hope. So how do you de-radicalize? By giving people hope, right? How do you change an entire society? And the question begins to arise too, which is the same old question we've always had, right? How much of it is us? How much of it is someone else? How much of it is inflicted upon us? How much of it is due to our choices in our culture? How much of it is because we are blamed for what we aren't, or we're called names, or we're thought of as evil, and so we decide that we are that name, or we are that evil, or we will go out in this way? How much of it is we tried to fight and then we just can't succeed? And how much of that reason for not being able to succeed is because of our own internal conflicts versus the enemy's actions, and so on? I mean, these are issues that happen over decades, centuries even. It's not clear how to fix it, right? You can, I think, look at individuals and say, okay, what is wrong with this individual? What happened to them? What injured them in such a way? And how do we stop that from happening again? But as far as huge events, right? She's in Palestine here, and a lot of the issues that they're going to talk about really are a result of the struggle between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's this is societal issue that that you look at a country or a culture and you're like, okay, 40% of the kids here have PTSD at the age of 12 or something. Every single person in the entire town of 10,000 has had a family member either arrested or killed. Every single person in the country has lost a family member. And I could say that about Palestine, or I could say that about at least parts of Israel at certain times. But again, I am outside, right? I'm not in the walls. I'm not locked up in prison. I'm not going through checkpoints. I'm sitting here safe, relatively safe, in the States, reading a book from 10 years ago about interviews and information that is passed through the minds of someone else. Anyway, he explains things here. The Palestinian students who go to work inside the Green Line see that the Israelis think the Palestinian is donkey. Then you can kill them. You can see this mentality in their school. So you grow up in Palestine and you're taught, hey, the Israelis hate us. They want to kill us. Right? I think this is something that obviously is a problem, right? If you are teaching in the schools that there's no compromise to be made, then there will be no compromise to be made. And people growing up will try to change that. They'll say we can make a better world, but you end up struggling against an entire society. You end up being the outsider by trying for a peaceful resolution, and there are millions of other folk who don't believe the same thing, or who have lost faith in the same thing. It says the thing that brings out the most anger in the young men, he explains, is being essentially locked inside their village. They're only able to cross out of it at the Hawara checkpoint into the Palestinian city of Nablus, where the university and the jobs are. When the Israelis built their settlement here, they built the Settlers' Road as well and destroyed everything surrounding the road and settlement, any home, any tree, for their security. And they created checkpoints for our people, large hills of soil with tanks and Israelis on top. Let me tell you how it is. When you climb the hill of muddy soils to the tank, you sink into it up to your thighs. Many women have to lift their skirts to get up. It's disgusting. When we get there, we stand in line for hours waiting to cross. I have stood for hours at the Hawara checkpoint. The Israelis take my ID, always keep me for at least 5 hours and then free me. Every time I thought, come on, get out of your tank, I want to kill you. Come on, get out of your tank, give me your hand, I want to kill you. It's not only me that felt this anger. This checkpoint is what has created the shaheeds, the bombers, in my village. The line, come, give me your hand, from mine to yours. That was written in so many wills of the martyrs before they exploded themselves. They all felt the anger inside just like I did, but unlike me, they decided to do something about it. Right? And we can understand this. Talk to any politically active person in the States, and what are you going to find? You're going to find they're either on the right or the left. Okay? And talk to someone who's extreme then. What are you going to find? You're going to find then they're extremist right or extremist left, and they're going to come up and they're going to say something like, the left is going to destroy our culture, destroy our country, they want to take all the money. If you're on the other side, you're going to say the right is going to destroy our culture, destroy our country, they want to take all our money. In different ways. And you can think, oh my gosh, you're going to look on the news and you're going to see something happening. You're going to see a protest at the Capitol. You're going to see a story about someone wandering into an office and shutting down a bunch of social aid. You're going to hear stories about bribes. You're going to hear stories about the destruction of buildings. You're going to hear stories about massive corruption, and you're going to hear stories about people being fired or fines, or someone showing up at the White House with a gold brick. You're going to hear stories about some trans person on a baseball team somewhere. You're going to hear stories about how dangerous the streets of San Francisco are. And you're going to think, this is a problem, and maybe I should do something about it. So you go out and you protest. So you go out and you write something. So you go out and you vote. But you don't have these outlets. You don't have the democratic outlets in this Palestinian territories that they're talking about here, right? You can't. Your vote. The Palestinian Authority doesn't hold votes. You can't vote. Vote doesn't matter. You can't talk to the Israeli soldiers because, hey, one of your friends blew up an Israeli soldier 4 years ago, and every Israeli soldier coming into that checkpoint is very well aware of this. So you come in as a soldier, and you already feel that they hate you. And then you come in as someone trying to pass a checkpoint, and you already feel that they hate you before you've talked because of the history. Right? Protesting, how do you protest? You got to pass through a checkpoint. Do you carry your sign there? Do you protest in your little town where no one can see you and all the media is controlled? You post online. That's about it. Maybe you can take a video. Maybe you can write a poem. But you don't have any hope of changing things. And so when he says here, I'm so angry, I'm stopped, I'm affected by this. And then at this point he says, they all felt the anger inside just like I did, but unlike me, they decided to do something about it. I mean, imagine how ashamed you must feel knowing that someone else does more than you, right? We feel bad enough when we hear that, oh, a friend tells us, I donated to the homeless shelters, or I went out and I handed out food. I went to the protest at the Capitol. I lodged a complaint about this book, which is bad, And we're sitting here feeling, okay, if I was stronger or better or smarter or cared more or had the resources or had the free time, yeah, sure, I'd get involved in that, but I don't really. And you could volunteer, you can go help, you could become active, you can try to change things. Most of us just stay at home. Most of us just go to work. Most of us just play with our friends. And I think we can all feel a little ashamed of that. Because we could be doing something and we aren't. We're saying, I am more important than this help. But we know at the same time ourselves that we can't give everything we are away all the time. We have to take care of ourselves first. We have to be able to center our emotions, or else we're going to spiral out of control. I can't give away all the money I have. Where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? I can't dedicate all my time helping this group or the other group. I might want to work with cats, fostering cats or something. But I also know that I'll have to deal with the emotional pain of seeing them go away, or of if I want to look after an elderly cat, knowing that I'm going to have to suffer the emotional pain of them dying, right? And I can't deal with that. I know my limits. And again, I have the privilege of being able to choose my limits. I know what I can do and what I cannot, and then I work within that. But when you can't, when you're forced, when I was young, my life was more like that. In that, you're stuck somewhere and you can't leave and you can't do anything. You're crushed and crushed and crushed until you come in like a black hole of stress. Then you hear somebody else did something about it. Or you listen to a story and someone else says, oh, they did that and it worked for them. And you're going to go, okay, maybe it'll work for me. It's the same positive outlook, right? Hey, I feel sick and fat and weak and ugly. but I picked up a book and I started reading, and it was about a bodybuilder, but it was a story of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and how he just he lifted heavy weights, he focused, he centered himself, and now he's world famous and the governor of California, and he looks great, and he's an actor, and he's famously successful, right? Okay, and I don't really expect that of my work, but hey, if I worked out, maybe I could become a little like him. So you do. But one bit that I tend to see here in these interviews is really the kids that she talks to. I say kids, they're in their 20s, but early 20s. The people she, but maybe I'm saying kids because they remind me of me as a kid. We'll see. Right. She's talking, the kids she's talking to, they mention like groups and people and suicide bombers, but they don't really mention what they want to do with their lives outside of that. They're like, I'm trying to become this or that, but like these are college age kids, and I'd expect at least a few of them to be like, oh, I'm studying anthropology. I want to be an anthropologist. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna learn about these things. I want to work with this tribe or that person, right? Or I'm gonna learn physics. I'm gonna do this or that. Or I'm gonna be in engineering. I'm gonna build bridges. Or I'm going to learn English. I'm gonna learn philosophy. I'm going to learn arts. Or I'm going to learn history, and I'll become a teacher. These kids aren't saying that, and maybe this is part of the fault of the interviews and like what is being mentioned here, but this is kind of what I feel maybe happening. Who do you admire? The people who are doing something, even if they fail, there's something to admire in those who do an attempt. And so that's what he's talking about here, right? They all felt the anger inside just like I did, but unlike me, they decided to do something about it. And that is the line which most speaks to me about how to get inside the mind of someone who is considering a terrorist action. They're angry and they want to do something about it. And the only way they see that they could is by death and fire and guns and explosions. They don't feel that there's a legitimate method for achieving their ends. They don't feel that there's the legitimate method for removing the checkpoints or for changing the world, right? They just feel they're trapped and there's no way out. And what am I possibly going to do? I can't get a job. I can't get a family. I can't get out of here. And even if you do, like you hope, oh my gosh, I'm going to find a beautiful girl or a beautiful guy. And then we're going to have beautiful kids and we'll live in our house and we'll be happy. But you're always thinking in the back of your head, Israelis could show up at any time and shoot all of us. Or you're thinking, I'm going to be the man of the house. I'm going to be proud and strong. And then you go to a checkpoint and you're held there for 5 hours. Or you're randomly picked up because someone thought you looked at them wrong. And you go into prison and it's 6 months, 7 months in. You talk to your kids once, twice, maybe. Maybe it's years you're in there. You don't know what's happening. You come out and you're angry again. You're so angry. You're back home and you've missed out on your children's lives. Your wife has grown distant from you. You don't actually have a job. You're just sort of sitting there. So there's a lot of not just angry young men, but like angry young women, right? She talks about this as a new thing, the female suicide bomber. Apparently it's new. Apparently it's different, possibly because of the differing, what do you call it, like gender roles in the society here. Because, you know, what do I want to say? I want to say, like, traditionally, if you're going to have if you're going to have gender differentials, then it's going to be something like guy goes out, works, mother stays home, works for, takes care of the children, sort of things, right? So if you are a mother, then then the old route of, like, I mean, like the old route that you've had for like 1,000 or 1,500 years that existed in the culture of, I'm going to stay home, I'm going to raise the kids. You always had that idea, that possibility that this is how you fulfill yourself. And, it may not always work. There may be issues and problems with living like that and having no creative outlet, no real power, political power, no real economic power. There are definitely problems there, but like emotionally, at least there is an answer available for you. Okay. But as a guy, it's a little less clear, right? If you can't provide, if you can't create, if you can't protect, then hey, you can take care of the kids, and that's good, and that's great, and that helps you, but also you're going to feel that you should be something else. Right? You're going to have this idea in your head. And I mean, we can talk in the States about reducing gender roles and reducing the dichotomy of gender roles and exchanging more capabilities or actions between the mother and the father and whatnot. We can talk about changing dress or how we act towards one another, or differences in pay. And I think that's important. It's something to do and try and fix to achieve a better world. But actions like that are also larger than they appear, right? Because you're trying to change a culture that has existed for a long time, and you have these ideas ingrained in people's minds. It's not like you can just flip a switch or snap your fingers and all of a sudden all of racism, all of sexism disappears. These people live, and the stories are in the books. I mean, here in the States, we're seeing a resurgence of, I'd say, sexism particularly, as a cultural backlash against changing culture and changing times. We're seeing a resurgence of radical religious viewpoints as well, as we deal with economic and political stresses. And for the most part, in the States, we have comparatively pretty nice life, right? You can go out and say, as a girl, I'm going to work, I'm going to create, I'm going to become important in the economics or the politics. I'm going to do something with my life outside the house, and as a guy in America, you can say, I'm going to be a house husband. I'm going to, provide for my family by taking a menial job. You can say that I want to be a fashion designer. And in a place like Palestine, I think this is maybe an admirable effort to undertake, but I can see the issues with that, right? Because you already have so many stresses going on. And when a culture or a people or a family or a person individually is under stress, they tend to repeat actions. They tend to regress to what worked for them, right? Their history, or their religion, or a political idea, or a terrorist idea that has taken root and acts as a pillar of support, a pillar of emotional support. It takes great courage to change, and also you need hope that this change is worthwhile. So when I'm talking about, like, as the guy is harder, I mean that if we look at the culture which I think we're talking about here, then there are fewer acceptable options. And you can say that's bad, that's wrong. You can say that we should fix it, but we also have to work with the culture that we have, right? Change is slow, more often than not. And then you have the intersection of different problems, right? Going back and forth. For example, you have the kid mentions here the girls had to hike up their skirts, and there's other times where girls will say something like they had to take off their headscarf, right? Or they were stuck in a room with 7 male Israeli soldiers, and like this was a problem, and so on and so on. And ideally, it's just another instance. Ideally, we look at them and say, well, that's something that is an infliction upon your religious rights or your right to privacy and so on. But as an individual, right, as me, myself, it takes on a greater effect based on what I believe and feel, my history, right? If I am confronting death and troubles and bullets are flying around, right? If people I know are dying, and this happens quite often, that I retreat to a religion, then all of a sudden the upsetting of those religious principles becomes even greater. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, right? I'm thinking, because I'm trying to put myself into their shoes, and I can in a little way. It's just the degree which is hard to comprehend, right? Because I can look at this and I can say, as a relatively well-adjusted person in a Western society who has been to therapy and reads books and has privacy and can go, take walks in the field looking at the sunset, listening to music that I like. I can go and study whatever I want. I can be whatever I want. If I want to be a fashion designer, I can do that. If I want to be a truck driver, I can do that. If I want to stay at home, if I want to leave, if I want to travel, if I want to dig holes in the backyard for no reason, I can do that. And this is my right as an American. This is my right as someone of the rich Western civilization to do whatever I want. Because we have the resources, we have the capability. We aren't fighting for our lives every moment of every day. We don't feel like we are, at least. We have safety nets. But one of the other differences also is we have family safety nets, yeah, but we have cultural safety nets, right? If we're homeless, we can go to a homeless shelter. There's people willing to give out food at food banks. I can probably get free help with submitting job applications. I can apply for housing, right? I can sit on the street and I can beg. There's a place for me. But what they're going to say here, what you're really going to notice, is that it's a different, more personal, social support structure you have. And it's your family that is your support structure, or it is the people in your town, your support structure, or your friends are your support structure, or a political group that is your support structure, or in many cases, a terrorist group that is your support structure, right? We look at Hamas, and we can ask, well, why is Hamas existent, because I hear stories of, them killing people because they're gay. I hear stories of them terrorizing citizens. I hear stories of them refusing to hold elections. I hear stories of them stealing building supplies. I hear stories of them, torturing people. I hear stories of them invading privacy. I hear stories of them, controlling guns or electricity or drugs. You hear stories of them like digging tunnels underneath houses without telling people, or putting their headquarters underneath hospitals, right? Or of holding hostages and refusing to let them go until 50,000 of their own people are dead, and the world knows how terrible this is, and so on. But there's the other side of that too, right? That as a government, they're in charge not only of all these horrible things, but a lot of good things. Hey, she'll talk about this too. She talks about this too in the book, right? Some family's home was destroyed because the Israelis come in and blew it up because one member of the family was a terrorist. And so the family's like, well, our home is gone, our furniture is destroyed. What happens to us? Well, they're going to receive help from the community. They're going to receive help from the area. You're going to receive, your son or daughter killed themselves, so here's $7,000 as a sort of blood price to rebuild your life. Right? We're going to help organize events. We're going to help ensure that there's running water. We're going to pick up the trash, these sorts of things. And it becomes all interconnected, right? We've all had this instances, I think, or many of us have, where we get in with a group of friends who really aren't that great of a friend to us, and really aren't nice people, and are really kind of cruel and mean, but hey, that's what we've got. That's who we can rely upon. And we want to escape. We want to end up with better groups of people. We want to be strong enough that we can be prideful in ourselves, but then you're stopped by the police, or you're called a name, or you're stuck in prison, and all of a sudden it's join this group, and you find solace in that. I hear from my friends who have graduated that there are no jobs. Why? It's all because Israel closed everything, attacked everything, destroyed everything. I find it interesting that it puts no blame on the wave of suicide, terrorism, and violence unleashed by Palestinians that forced Israel to tighten its borders and made many Israelis loathe the Palestinians, but decide to keep silent on that point and simply listen. Right? How do you deal with two groups of people that tell differing stories? How do you deal with two groups of people who they agree on the same facts, but they tend to look at certain ones as much more important than others? They did it to us first. They attacked us first. Or sure, there were some suicide bombs, but those were not the majority of Palestinians. And if they had just worked with us, then we could have come to an agreement. Or we already heard that there was an agreement. There was the Oslo Accords or something else. And then life was going to get better, but then life got worse. And so they did it. And the Israelis are going to hear something like, well, we did this, and then they blew up, or they attacked us, or they refused to stop their claim that Israel should be destroyed, and bits like that, right? And you're going back and forth. And again, I'm outside. I'm listening to this. I've been listening to this my entire life. And I've probably read 3 or 4 books about it, including this one. You get so tired of it. But again, I can leave. I'm beginning to repeat myself, so I'm going to go over and over. I'm going to continue this a little faster, let's say. Right? Trauma survivors who've been overwhelmed with violence and life-threatening experiences are forced into reliving these post-traumatic memories until they find meaning and a way to fit what has happened into their life narrative. When something terrible happens to you, how do you understand it? What is the story on here? What's going on? Right? Is the story that this happened to me and I'm going to be better, I'm going to improve, I'm going to escape it, I'm going to evolve? Or is the story, this happened to me and this is why it happened to me, and this is the people who did it to me, and these are the folks who understand my pain and my suffering, and this is what I have to do to get rid of the suffering, this is what I have to do to repay those people, this is what I have to do to fight back at the folk who have attacked me or attacked my people, attack my folk, and now I'm going to go and blow myself up. Stories. How do you give them a different story? How, I mean, that's really the bit, right? If you have a population that is consistently fighting and fighting, then that is happening for one of two reasons, I would say. One reason is they think that fighting will fix a problem. Or two, they're fighting because they don't know what else to do. This happens too in our daily lives, as in a smaller way, as individuals. Sometimes you're arguing with someone, you're so angry that you just punch the wall. Sometimes you're arguing with someone and you come to realize that, oh, they have no actual intention to agree with you. I mean, have you sat there talking to someone at the front door who's trying to sell you something, you say, no, and they keep going on and on and on until eventually you just slam the door in their face. Right? You're like, I'm sorry, that's nice, goodbye. Right? You ever been online with a company trying to cancel something, and they just keep giving you the runaround, and now it's 2-3 hours later, and they still won't let you cancel the bloody gym membership? Start shouting at people. You don't know what to do. So you start yelling and screaming, you start acting out, you start trying to enforce your will on the world. It's the same way. It's just, we have our voices, they have explosives. And so, what's the story? How do you, like this, if I was going to solve some of this problem, it would be, you have to figure out the story you want to tell first. You have to figure out what the goal is. You can't just say it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. You have to say it's bad and this is how we fix it, this is what we do. Really, the intractable problems for the Palestinians and the Israelis come down, at least it appears to me, in that neither of them have a clear understanding of what a peaceful solution is. There's no agreement of how to actually stop this and end this. There's no vision even beyond one or the other side magically disappearing. Okay. He explains to us that the only way to Beit Forik is to take the mountain road that bypasses the Israeli settlements. What he doesn't explain is that there is technically no road, and we will essentially be going off-road for the last part of the journey and traveling in an area in that manner is strictly forbidden by the Israelis. Right? She's in a truck at this point, hoping that the Israelis won't kill her, won't shoot at her. Right? The Israelis see males under the age of 30 as security threats. With the exception of university students who are also often barred, adult males under 30 are not allowed to cross out of Beit Forik. So you aren't an adult until you're 30, because you can't leave your house. And why? Not because of your society, because of someone else's. No wonder you're angry. But at the same time, who is the most likely to be involved in terrorism? Young males. For a variety of cultural and historical reasons. So, again, you see the problem. Oh my gosh, they look at me as a member of a group. I'm a Palestinian of 25, so I must be a terrorist. I must be dangerous. You should see me as an individual. But if you see everybody as an individual, what does that mean? You need that information. You need connections. And again, we can't do that. There's millions. It's not like you're dealing with, the 2 people that you meet and talk to every day. This is maybe 10,000 people in the village. You may have a soldier rotating through every 4 or 6 months. The amount of resources needed are incredible. Right? Like, it makes you wonder if something like the Chinese system of social points would work. Right? If you have a surveillance system of like that point, part of the possible good. Okay, so we're treading on dangerous ground here, right? Talking about an absolute surveillance system by a country, by a government. Part of the arguably positive results of that is that someone has a high social score, that they're good people, that you can trust them not to steal or destroy or blow themselves up. The bad action of that sort of social score, that absolute surveillance state, of course, is that the government can just decide that you're bad. Can just call you a name and say, well, it's like insurance, right? Okay, you are a teenager. You're 18. This is your first car. High insurance. You're a teenager. You're 18. You're Palestinian. Low social score. It's the same way. So you need, at the very least, a social score that is not built on government decisions or not. You need something that is automatic, but then you're dealing with the algorithm, and that's a problem, right? So you have these other issues when you're dealing with large numbers of a population what you think is violent. You can collect a bunch of information about them and spend all these resources getting them to know those individuals and assigning them scores and so on. But this consumes a lot of resources. It's very tiring. You need a lot of money, and you could be doing all sorts of other things while you're doing this. And when you surveil people, they tend to not trust you. They tend to think something's wrong. They tend to think you don't believe that they are good people. Part of the huge, absolutely gigantic issue here is that if you're Palestinian, why would you trust the Israeli government? And if you're the Israeli government, why would you trust the Palestinian movement? Could someone else, could you have a third party come in and make them work together? But that would require essentially massive numbers of troops. Or an extreme economic blockade effort. Right? And then you're talking about the justification. We don't like to kill others, but we are under occupation. In every revolution in the world, some die. They take over our land. We tried peace. We have pride for those who die, right? And that's the story. We tried peace and it didn't work. I'm talking about, I've heard this for 100 years. Shoot, but I haven't lived it for 100 years. I've read about this for 30 years. I've seen it on the news. I've heard about it. I know people who are involved in it. But I'm not there. I'm not living this sensation. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not inspired to be a terrorist. And even if I can understand in a way why someone chooses that path, I want to believe that there are other paths that can be chosen, right? There are non-violent and democratic ways of changing the world. But it's difficult. It's hard. It involves a lot of trust. It involves a lot of strength. And not just like strength of character, but in the sense that you have to be willing to let your enemy become strong. Because then you can work with them. You have to be willing to let your enemy become centralized and focused and capable, because then you can work with them. If your enemy is fractured and confused and has 30 different political movements, is isolated village from village, is undergoing massive amounts of stress, then you touch it and it cracks, it breaks, and all of a sudden you got shards of glass flying everywhere and blood on the ground. Right, so we tried peace. Well, I don't know. I don't really feel like anyone's tried peace. And it talks about the settlements again. Palestinian offenders are quickly apprehended and strictly punished. It appears that Israeli settlers are not controlled in the same manner. B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, has criticized Israeli authorities for being lax in the offenses committed by the Israeli settlers. His father reflects on the violent events of the two intifadas during which Habash grew up. He had no childhood, really. A kid gets raised up within this mentality. He gains a certain consciousness, and he wanted what's been stolen from him. That is another thing. We have lands and olive trees, but because of the settlers, we cannot go to them. The Israelis killed an old man from a village who went to harvest his olives, and they used a heavy rock to break the arms of many of the children of our relatives. These children stayed in the hospital many days. Living here, we know that death can occur at any moment. If you take the general point of view by the mosque and the Quran, by the speeches, and also by the Israeli actions against us, there is encouragement. Some should go and others should not. Everyone gets the urge. Evidently, he feels everyone in his village at times feels enough despair and anger to be willing to die, trying to drive the settlers away, but that the group that had sent his son preyed upon these feelings. His comments, however correct, fail to acknowledge the other side of the story. The Palestinians living near Itamar are also incited to acts of terrorism from their anger over their lands being infringed upon and being boxed into their villages by abusive checkpoints and violent harassment from the settlers who continually encroach onto Palestinian territory, and that doesn't seem likely to end anytime soon. It seems if both sides continue in this manner, young men like Habash will continue to live in anger and despair, and his terror act is doomed to be repeated in the future. Okay. Right, then the story of some kid who went with a weapon to Israeli settlement. Once everyone, in retaliation, the Israelis destroyed a house. Once everyone was out of the house, the Israelis used dynamite to demolish it. They surrounded the house and rigged it up with explosives and destroyed it around 1 or 2 p.m. 2 to 3 weeks after his act, the Israelis gave us permission to receive his body, but it was just a ploy by the intelligence units of the Israelis to get us to come. And then presumably they interrogated them. Or imprisoned them. Right, this kid was shot at 14 years old. He was shot in the knee. Then he was with a rubber bullet. Then he was shot when he was 15. Then he was shot when he was 16. And then a 4th time they hit his right shoulder from behind. The 5th time he got shot coming back to school. Was he throwing rocks or doing anything to provoke them? Saeed's father shakes his head. The patrol just started shooting at the kids. I mean, you want to strike back. You want to do something. And again, there is an answer. Someone tells you that they can give you a bomb and you can walk in, you can kill and destroy these folk. Now, there is bits here about, like there were 1,000 or 100 or whatnot suicide bombings and over these years, and it sounds like a lot, but what are there? Something like 2-3 million Palestinians. 100 suicide bombers out of a 2 million is very low, and it's interesting how we respond to this. Like as societies, it's a question. We're looking from the outside. If we were an alien descending upon the earth, you would go, okay, so like 3 people did this thing, and that changed how your entire society views this problem. You know, you had one plane go down because of a technical issue, and because of that, you grounded all the planes, and you changed the entire course of this company. And yet, you look at the rate of deaths caused by cars, and your first concern is the plane? Like, why does this small number of issues cause such a problem? Because we expect the plane to be safe. Because the stories we tell ourselves are that flying is safe. Cars, we think, okay, yeah, cars are more dangerous than planes, but for the most part, they're also safe. But the stories these kids are telling is that we are not safe. 100 suicide bombers is too much. It could be any one of them coming into our country and blowing themselves up and killing our folk. One destroyed house is too much. One kid being shot with a rubber bullet is too much, because they could happen to us. And we might think, okay, it's just a few isolated incidents, but that's the saying that one bad apple spoils a whole barrel has a deeper meaning to it. It's not just we look at the barrel and go, oh, one bad apple makes it worthless. We won't want to eat any apple from that barrel because of the one apple. No, it also means that a rotten apple spreads its rottenness. The one story about a black kid being shot by the police spreads, and everyone goes, okay, I've known something like this. I've heard this. And I saw this in the news yesterday, and then last month, and then the year before that, and then 2 years before that, and then 5 years. And I remember hearing about this when I was a kid, something similar. And these incidents may not be all that commonplace, right? You may only be stopped for driving while black once or twice in your life. But you've known somebody who that has happened to. It happens just often enough that it's part of the story, that you have reinforcement for it. So that's how entire societies grow up like this. The stories you tell, the beliefs you have as a people about how you are seen and to be expected. They're at a checkpoint. The young soldier returns with his superiors and says, I can't let any of the Palestinians pass. Doesn't tell me why. Just, okay, they're Palestinian, and today we decided. So it's really it's also arbitrariness. If I expect that I'm dealing with the police or the army or a politician or the mayor or a soldier somewhere, and I know the rules and laws they act under, then I can expect a certain reaction, right? If I go to the airport and I say something about, like, jokingly, oh, I have a bob in my shoe, I expect to get searched. I expect that everyone knows I'm joking, but they're going to do their job and pull me aside and put me in a room and say, why did you tell that joke? You know, we're going to take off your shoes. We're going to search everything about you because you told a joke about explosives. And maybe it was just a joke, but I got to do my job. It's the same when we're stopped by the police when they give us a ticket. We want to think, okay, police stopped me, put my hands on the wheel, right? He comes by, I slowly give him my insurance and registration, driver's license. He says, you were doing this. I say, I'm sorry. He gives me a ticket. He goes away. I drive on. I go to the court, I pay the ticket, right? And if I do what I'm supposed to do, then he'll do what he's supposed to do. And we know how this acts, right? Like we hear stories sometimes of like folk being stopped by the police, and then you see a video and you're like, okay, the policeman told you to put your hands behind your head and you started arguing with him. What do you think is going to happen? Like, dumbass, just do what you're told, right? Because he's doing his job. You got to do your job. And if you do that, then you'll come out of this fine. But people get scared. People get worried. People think that I'm going to react to this person, like this police officer, right? The same as I would with the security guard at the mall, right? But you can't. You're in a different situation here. And then sometimes we hear the opposite, right? Some person is stopped by the police and they're perfectly fine. They're very polite. You see the video, policeman decides to take a baton and break down the window, you know? Or they're pulling somebody off the side of the road. And they say, can you open your car door and come out? The guy does. He opens his car door, he steps out, and he takes 2 steps. He's thrown on the ground. Hands behind your back. You know, you're going to be stuck here in a prone position for the next 45 minutes while we work out the paperwork. No, both why? Because people are people. They don't always act according to the rules. You don't always act as if we're all machines. And so that is part of the problem, I think, right? If you have to go through checkpoints and you don't really understand what the criteria is for the checkpoints. I mean, there are stories in here, constant stories of, I was arrested, they didn't tell me why. I'm like, can you imagine what that does to you? I might walk down the street and, you know, see a gangbanger or see a policeman and, you know, become a little worried. I might walk in the street and see a person, you know, walking a big scary dog and become worried. But I generally feel in my daily life, I know how to act and I know what they are and we get along. But like, you know, the first time that I'm walking along the street and somebody I've never even seen before in my life, you know, looks at me weird and arm bars me, you know, or punches me in the face. And I'm like, I look around, I'm like, what the hell was that? You know, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know why he hit me. And he's got crazy eyes. He continues walking. And the next time I see someone who looks like that, I freak out a little bit. I'm like, okay, you look exactly like that other guy that punched me. I don't know you. And I'm just incorporating my previous experience into my judgment about what you might possibly do. So I'm a bit worried. You know, and then you see the next person that looks like them. And eventually you're like, okay, I'm not afraid of black guys anymore. But you were afraid because the guy who punched me was a black guy. Right? And that, I remember that effect, right? I was like, oh my gosh, you look like that person who hurt me. It's the same thing with people who like look like my dad. Sometimes I was walking the street. I remember this clearly, right? I was once walking along the street in Mexico and see someone that looks like my dad ahead of me and I freak out. I don't know them, right? They're just another guy, you know, heavy-set guy with black hair, but I freak out because, oh my gosh, like internally, they look like this. It's the same imagine if, like the police, right? If you don't have a lot of interaction with the police, or you've had a bad interaction with the police before, the next time you're stopped, you start to freak out a little bit. Hey, if you are the police and you had a interaction with someone who you stopped on the side of the road to give them a ticket and they freaked out, or they had a gun, or you heard about your friend in the other department who stopped somebody and they had a gun and then they shot him and they died, right? And then you're gonna look at this and you're gonna go, oh my gosh, this is dangerous. Because you're interpreting. It's not about good or bad or right or wrong or how we should or should not see the world, right? It's about how do we incorporate our previous experiences and how do we understand which parts of those experiences are relevant and which parts are not, right? Like the next time I see a black guy walking the street, I'm not going to freak out, right? I'm not worried. But the next time I see a guy with crazy eyes, I'm going to back off a little bit, right? I'm like, okay, I recognize there's something wrong with the way that person is looking at me. Like there's something I can tell in the eyes. There's something not quite right here. You know, they're on drugs or schizophrenic or who knows what, right? I don't know, but I recognize a look in those eyes. I'm gonna go, okay. But if I start interacting with folk who have that same look, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 people, then all of a sudden I sort of know how to deal with it. All of a sudden I'm not afraid anymore. All of a sudden I understand that it's just a way of life. It's just a effect people have. It's just how their eyes are constructed or something. And I'm referring to physical bits of information because that's kind of the personal experience I had. But it gets more complex, right, when you're dealing with uniforms, when you're dealing with police or soldiers who represent a certain type. You want to think they're following the rules and that if you follow the rules, they'll follow the rules and you can explain and talk. But really, right, a soldier isn't encouraged to do that. A soldier is encouraged to, you do this. Like, I think I've seen videos of like the police getting into a situation and they come in and guns out, they're shouting, they're screaming, they're like, get on the floor, get on the floor, get on the floor, nobody move, get on the floor, hands above your head, right? Because they don't know what they're getting into. They just know that in this house, there are people who might have guns. Or that these 3 people are fighting on the streets and one of them might have a knife, right? And I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to believe. I don't know who started this. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to make sure I'm going to control everything. I'm going to get every single person here sitting on the ground in handcuffs, and then I'll figure out what happened, what's going on. Like you can be interrogated by the police and you can feel like you're being blamed and attacked, but really they're just like, they're trying to figure out what's going on. And I mean, we do this as individuals, right? We give the benefit of the doubt to folk, and then we realize one day some folk, which is crazy, some folk are liars. Some folk are mean and cruel. And you trust them less. You back away a little bit. Try to view it with a jaundiced eye. But we can do that because we aren't traumatized all the time. If you're in a situation where you are traumatized, where there is no way out, where you're interacting with this person again and again and again, or you're a policeman on active duty, and you're not getting psychological help, and you're encountering these stressful situations, it starts to weigh on you and weigh on you and weigh on you until one day you're not the 24-year-old straight out of the academy that is willing to sit there and talk somebody down from their wild antics. I talk with 5 or 10 minutes talk. Instead, you're not the person who is gonna stand there trying to get the guy to come out of his car so that you can search him for weapons or whatnot. You're gonna be the person at 35, 40 or something who just had enough of this crap, right? Look, I know how this goes. You experience this at work, right? Someone starts to tell you a story and you're like, okay, you don't have to tell me the story. You don't have to give me the whole BS. I know what you're going to say. I know what I'm going to say. Let me just preempt this entire conversation by telling you what's going to happen. I'm telling you my final answer. Because I don't have the time to sit here and argue with you for 15 minutes about the policy of the business I work at. I don't have time. I don't want to sit here and deal with your worries about being stopped by a policeman. Right? I'm just trying to do my job. So look, just get out of the car. Let me search you. We'll be done. Or just look. Give me your ID. Get you the ticket. You get out of here. I get out of here. I don't need you doing things. It's the same with the person being stopped, right? You're like, look, here's my ID. Give me the ticket. Let me get out of here. Okay, why are you stopping? Why am I getting out of the car? I'm worried now. What's going on? I've seen those videos. I'm talking about the police here because it's something that as Americans we encounter. People in Western civilization we encounter in these sort of same stressful situations, right? Where it is a person in a uniform with a weapon. The difference is that this is a person in a uniform with a weapon, and you aren't being stopped in your car. Instead, you're being held at gunpoint in the middle of a field that you think belongs to you. You're looking at invaders. Or, on the other hand, you're looking at folk who support a political movement that calls for the death of your entire country. I'm trying not to take entirely one or the other side, because if you do that, then you cut off opportunities for dialogue. Okay. There's 700 pages in this, so I'm gonna start flipping around. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on Israel because I'm looking at chapter 19 now, and I've been talking for an hour. I could talk for another 3-4 hours about this, and it would just be the same story. I would start freaking out in the same way again and again and again. Right? How do you justify sending bombers to civilians, I interject. Our losses are civilian too, Ahmed says calmly. We are allowed to die, to have no birds, no trees, bullets in our kitchens, all of this, but we are not allowed to hurt a civilian. We are civilians too. If you give us tanks, military trainings, jets, etc., then you will see that we will fight with their army, not with their civilians. It's their violence, Sharon's fault. It's savage. If they elect a peaceful government, then we will be able to talk. It's the Israelis themselves who elect and re-elect Sharon. I think how many times I've heard the Israelis say they have no partner for dialogue among the Palestinian leadership, and now I am hearing the same from him. Right? Each side says we can't talk, we can't talk. We've tried to talk, and we get attacked. And this is what happens in issues between groups of people. It's not just one person and one person. It's not just a family arguing back and forth. It is massive numbers. And so what I think is at least part of the problem is that the Palestinians don't have a very clear political leadership that is trusted. And the Israelis have no interest in allowing the Palestinians to have a clear political force that is trusted. Why? Because the only way to be trusted as a political force is to be, to some extent, anti-Israeli. Because that was the history. So if the Israelis want to work with a Palestinian leadership that they can have a dialogue with, and that Palestinian leadership has to, it can't be the PA, who hasn't had elections in years. It can't be Hamas, who is calling for the destruction of all of Israel. And even if it is, even if they talk with one of these groups, there's going to be splinter groups. There's going to be the fact that neither PA or Hamas are strong enough in their own areas to control every single person, you know, to absolutely limit all fighting. And the question also arises on the other side. How capable are the Israeli government of controlling their own people? Even if you elect a peace party in Israel, you're still going to deal with hundreds of people in the settlements day in, day out. You're still going to have to deal with people who have had long histories of violence, who have lost family members to Palestinian terrorists. You're still going to have to deal with the constant grumbling and death and struggle and stress. You're still going to have to deal with everyone saying we need to go faster, or we're not doing fast enough, or they aren't talking with us rightly, aren't talking with us honestly. You know, on each and both sides, it's how do you enforce trust when there's 100 years of trouble? You have to have a middle. Either you need like some great power to arise inside one of these groups. If you look at India, Gandhi is something like that, right? A great power who arises within the Indian independence movement. If we look at the United States, Martin Luther King, a great power that arises from within the civil rights movement. Of course, I'm looking at this from years afterwards through books and stories, and maybe they weren't, almost certainly they weren't the idols. They weren't the ideograms. They weren't, you know, the all-powerful, amazing folk that everyone looks up to and who are in charge of every section that we tend to think they are. But there's a reason that those stories have come down to us of these great people. And I really wonder what would happen in Palestine if that was going on. If you had a leader arise in Palestine who said, we're going to choose peace, would they be killed by their own people? Would they be arrested by the Israelis for daring to speak out about this? Like, so if you look at the history of the PLO, and I'm not an expert in it, I'm basing this based entirely upon a book I read once. As I understand it, there was a person called Yasser Arafat who ended up in charge of the PLO. And he ended up in charge of the PLO because everyone above him was killed. So it wasn't like he was the most competent or the best or the smartest. I mean, he accepted the Oslo Accords, obviously not all there, I would say. And part of the question is, if someone else had been in charge, would they have made a better deal? If someone else had been in charge, would they have not managed to piss off so many of the countries they stayed in? You know, if there had been a different power at the helm, would things have changed? If the Palestinian Authority or Hamas had allowed there to be elections in the territories they controlled, would things have changed? And there's this temptation always to think that I have to be in charge. My movement has to be in charge because the others don't know what they're doing. The others are weak, or the others are going to make bad choices. Or the others are too soft, and the others are too hard, right? That I and my group and my people and my ideas are right and correct and good and holy and honest. But the idea of democracy is that this is not the case. It's not only that there's no one true way, it's that there's no one true leader. There's no president or priest that is going to save everybody. And I suppose you could have some third party come in and enforce the peace. But again, this would require massive resources. And then I'm like, look, if you had 1 million troops, 1 million military troops, and 50,000 psychologists and a police force of 100,000 and $4 trillion for rebuilding the land, could you make peace? If you had all these resources, could you make peace? Or would one side or the other not believe what's going on? Would outside powers interfere? Would Iran support some terrorist group that exploded some building somewhere, and all of a sudden the entire process is obliterated because of one explosion, or one person died, or 2 explosions, or 3 explosions, or 4 explosions? Like, how much control do you need? And you control so much that you end up destroying the very freedom you're trying to protect. And it's just one of those, right? Like, what is the answer? As an individual, that's what this book focuses on some sort of hope that you could not just have a Palestine, not just have an Israel, but that as an individual Palestinian or an individual Israeli, you could lead a life which is worthwhile and safe. Bashar is studying political science, but is an artist by inclination. He pulls out a collection of his drawings and explains them to me shyly. The first is a gallows. What does it mean to you, I ask? It's what I expect of life. The second is a drawing of a man with disconnected parts lying on the ground and footprints all around him. He's been stepped on by everyone, Bashar explains, the occupation, his own government, his people. It seems to me that Bashar has drawn an image that represents a state of disassociation, when the body no longer feels connected normally to parts of the mind, like the ability to think, feel, or remember. Those all drop out. His drawing reflects how many Palestinians experience themselves. Like, it's difficult to explain. It's difficult to comprehend as someone who's dealt with trauma. I understand this viewpoint and this feeling and the rage and the despair. And for my own life, I think that there are ways I can get out of that. I've managed to get out of that. Ways I can travel and create and love and grow. But you read this enough times and you go back in your head to that feeling of stress. You sort of repeat it because I'm emphasizing with someone else. Right? He says, death is stronger than life, he explains. Hate is stronger than life. It's not that I love death and hate. I love these emotions because they are strong. They are wrong, but strong. Bashar has explained the psychological conflict of identifying with an aggressor. Victims often cannot stand to face their powerlessness and instead identify with the power of the aggressor, preferring to remember what hate and power feel like versus powerlessness and pain. Basher, if you carried a bomb, would you feel pity for your civilian victims? No, because every one of them, if they have the chance to kill me, they will. Have you been to prison? No, he shakes his head, but I expect it every day. Any time they can grab you and take you. Okay, so next time I'm going to cover I'm going to cover two particular ideas. Because I do feel like I start repeating myself. I'm basically going to end up skipping like 10, 15 chapters. You know, where people are shot and people are killed and people don't know what to do, and people make martyrdom videos, and mothers sigh and cry over the deaths of their children. But there are others. There are other ideas going on here. And next time we'll cover two of those. In Israel, she's going to visit Gaza, and then she's also going to talk to someone I found quite interesting, who was a suicide bomber that decided not to blow themselves up. And that's what we'll do next time. We'll cover and finish her interviews of Israeli and Palestinian terrorists, at least. For now, though, I'm going to eat some food, take a shower, try and calm down a bit before tackling these ideas and feelings again. Right? I realize that today I've been rather political, but I think the book, Talking to Terrorists, why are people terrorists? For personal reasons, they decide to kill and hurt and go to war. But terrorism itself is a political act. It is causing pain and suffering and death for the purpose of a political change. And so this is why my statements and views about the conflict are political as well, because you can look at the terrorists they're talking to as individuals and say we can fix them here, or this is wrong with them, and so on. But when you do that, you can become blind to who they are as a group, who they see themselves as. Am I Palestinian? Am I American? Am I British? And what does that mean for me and my own self-identity? How do you give hope to these identities? How do you manage to say that the fighting can end and actually prove that it could? How do you stop terrorism? How do you stop the need for terrorism? Is a huge question. And I would say the answer is somewhere in the balance, right? We can talk about terrorism in general across all people, across the entire planet. Or we can talk about terrorism as individual, person by person. Or we can talk about terrorism as a state problem, as a culture or a tribal issue. Repeated again. And we like to think in our modern world that, especially as Americans, that state is based on identity. State is based around laws. A state is based around a land. But that isn't the only grouping that exists. You have cultures and histories and feelings as well. You have all the stories that people tell themselves.